Okay, so now let's look at this security the rules, how the roles are assigned to the users, and the security aspect of it, about how these roles are actually defined and segregated. Since you've already seen this, this is common across, and this is another topic which is common across the modules. So the roles are there are four types of roles. We usually call them as job, duty, abstract, and data roles. So how are they divided? The division is something like this. Whatever data the user has to have access on is the data role. So that role. It's like bottom-up approach here, the one that we're looking at. So there is a phase that we normally use in Fusion. It says who's going to work on what. So with that phrase, if you look at it, the roles, usually the bottom layer is the data role. So data role essentially tells you what is the data, if it is related to a particular business group, or a piece of data that the user should be having access to, is what the data role tells. Data role sets up that context. Then we have the abstract role. These are not specific to any job as such, but these are more like the employee role or the contingent worker role. So these are those kind of roles. So that's these are if you are an employee, you are given this role, because the moment you give this, then you will have some extra privileges related to this, which the contingent or contract workers don't need to have. They don't need to have certain privileges. So then we have the job role. The job role is again, and this is more of what you are hired for, is what job role defines. And duty role helps you to do the job that you're assigned for. So if accounts payable, if you want to call accounts payable as a duty role, accounts payable manager as a duty role, then whatever the user is allowed to do using this role is what helps the user perform his role as a manager. So now if you look at it, see this thing is the job role, and the privileges also make up the job role, because under the privileges you have the functions, but it's not a role as such, it's a privilege. That's what we call it. And if you also look at it, you would also find the duty roles. Alright, so you see here, these are the duty roles. So job role is what you're hired for in the company, and duty role is what enables you to do that job role. Like I said, abstract is either either given to a contractor or to an employee. And then the data role is, or it's more of the context setting. As a accounts payable clerk, what is the data that you should be having access to? So that the data access set and the data role, those set that up. Privileges is those functions that are related or that roll up into the job role or the duty role. These essentially give you these access to those functions, those menus, if you want to call in AWS terms. So those are the privileges. Now you set up the user using this option. You come here, you set up the user, and in case you want to change or assign the role, or you want to create a custom role, you can do it from here. Usually you come here to define a role and add the user to the custom role that you define. Otherwise you would use you would open up the user, query the user, and then edit the user. Now if I let's take Casey Stevenson. So you edit the user to add the role. Use this option to add the project team member. You see those things? So this is how we add the roles. But for a custom role, when you're defining it, you want to, in case you want to add the user directly, you don't have to again open the user, but let me see if I've got any custom. Yeah, let's see this thing. It's a custom BI admin role. Now, usually for these roles, what we try to do is we edit them and we try to add the user here. So we go in here and we add the user. So this is only for the custom roles. We don't try to edit the standard seated roles. Instead, we go into the user and we add the role. That's the approach we normally take. So this is regarding the roles. And once you set the roles, remember we've already discussed this thing, the data access set for the user. We tried giving the data access set for this user. Remember for the US business East and West, we tried setting that up, right? So that is how we give the user access. So this is, like I said, this is again a common topic. This you will be going through every other training that you are attending. So it's just good to know. Okay, so now let's start with the project foundation. Yeah, project foundation. Okay, when this is more like the base, and these setups are that you should be doing, essential setups or prerequisite setups that you will have to perform when you're setting up this module. So these are the three required tasks: the accounting calendar, the periods for the financial management, and then the revenue categories. So these are the three setups, but apart from this, there is a list. This is the entire list. So now let's look at, these are the value sets. The value sets are the same concept as in this. Whatever, in case you want to have some additional value sets defined under which you want to hold some values, you would use this, and this you would be using for the descriptive flex fields. There is very less scope, if you want to call it that way. So there's a little or less scope for us to really be using this, unless, of course, you have something which the standard doesn't really cater to. In those cases, you would want to set up these value sets. But otherwise, it's something that we don't usually do. One typical example that I have seen is that I've done is in the billing, where I wanted some additional value to be captured. So that is where I did. But then again, there was a limitation, because of which it was not flowing all the way to AR. So we had to put that in the description and take it across from the module. So usually we don't tend to use this much, or this is not much in practice. So the general messages, in case you want to pop up any messages, and foundation attachment categories just for the attachment. So let's look at the calendar. So now, before we look at the calendar, let's also set that expectation there. So there are three types of calendars, as we already know. One is the GL, the regular one. Then we have something as accounting calendar, and then there's project accounting calendar. So there are three calendars that we look at, or that we have. So what actually happens here in these three calendars, or how are they different from each other? So when I say GL calendar, it's the regular general ledger calendar, which we do not have access to, or which we do not define. It's done by the finance team. That's it's used, or that's the calendar which drives the GL. And since everything flows into GL, it has to, all the subledgers and others have to follow that convention. Then we have two other calendars, the accounting calendar and the project accounting calendar. So how are they different from each other? Accounting calendar is similar, or it's a subledger calendar. So when the transactions are flowing from between the projects and GL, this is the calendar that we use. So all the costing transactions, depending on the date and the one that we see, it has to have this calendar, or it follows this calendar, that the one that we define. We can have this copied from it usually follows the same convention. So if you look at it, this let's take one example, one sample here. We'll just quickly see this. So the project accounting calendar, the place where it actually differs. So in case you need to have a calendar that is specific just for the working of the projects, right? When you're using the budgeting option, or when you're in cases where your planning is different from it's specific to projects, and it is different from the GL planning, the GL calendar. Maybe you might be having a weekly calendar or a bi-weekly calendar where you want to track your progress basis that. That is when you would be using the project accounting calendar. You could also have, you can have the same calendar between the when you call the project accounting periods and the normal accounting periods. You can have it the same way. That's going to you use that option to track it for having the common periods or different. In case you want to have different, the use of that is where you want to track the progress, the work progress, depending on the period, the frequency of the periods, or the duration of the periods that is different from what you have in your accounting period or the GL period. Otherwise, the accounting calendar, the accounting periods for this is same as the GL period calendar or the GL calendar.
Can you give us an example where it has to be different?
Yeah. So the example, you can your work week. Say for example, now let's take this training. The progress that you have made in work week 1, work week 2, and work week 3. If you want to divide that way, in each month, again, 3 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on the number of days. If you want to track it that way, you want to report out the work. In that case, you further divide it into weeks. So when you're dividing it into weeks, you need to have a calendar to track that, right? So your periods to track that. So the number of periods over there would increase. To have that, to track that periods, you're going to use project accounting periods. So the progress that you're making by week, you cannot do because your accounting period is by month, right? That's what we see here. But in case you want to have the progress, the one that you have used for planning. So week 1, I need to make progress, and based on that, I want to have my reports run. You costing whatever you've done, you would also want to check how much it is done by week in case you're tracking that way. So you're going to have 53 weeks, right? 52, 53 weeks. That's what we have in a calendar year. But the normal periods that we'd be having is either 12 or 13, the 12 plus 1 adjusting period. So now there's 12 and 52, these are two different periods. How would you actually track this? You would make use of this accounting period, the project accounting period, to track these sub periods in terms of the accounting, or period wise in terms of project accounting period. You want to track your progress on the project or progress on the training. This is what you would use. This is specific to projects module. It doesn't have any implication on any other module.
And do we open and close those even project accounting calendar?
Yes, we do that. And once you've set this period and you have you've got the transactions populated, or the summarizations from the project's perspective, if you've already done that, then you cannot change the period, date range, or those stuff. You cannot do that. So this is either done before, or you do this if needed to track the progress of the project from the specific to the project, specific to projects module. If you want to track that particular summarization, that particular what you call from that lens, if you were looking from that lens and say that this is what we did, this is how much we made, and this is all that stuff, then you use this. Otherwise, the regular practice is to keep them common, unless otherwise forced, where you really need to have this week-wise or bi-weekly, or the one that is going to be different. In that case, we use. Otherwise, most of the time we have the regular. We use the common periods between the accounting and the project accounting periods. So it's going to be common across, right until the GL periods. So if you want to use it that way, you could use it. Otherwise, you can define a separate calendar. This is manage accounting periods for the. This is for the regular accounting calendar. Now, if you look at this, just open up, and you will. So now, in this case, okay, this is not set up here. We get the projects one as well here. It's the same one. In case you want to use the GL periods, you try and track from here. The opening and closing, everything happens from here. Similar way. Somebody's not open these periods. Okay. A second, it should. Okay. It's back on the papers. Let's just refresh. Okay, you see this primary. You see this primary ledgers. This is the regular GL. This is the regular GL, and when you come to payables, then you would use the payable specific. Likewise, the projects. You could track all of these from the GL option. When you go open up the GL for the periods, you could check it from here as well. This period options, you would come back to the same page, and that's where you would be able to use this option. The regular practices, we would use it from here, but you could also check the setups from here, the period setups from here. Alright, so then we have unit of measure. A unit of measure is this is what we use for you're tracking the quantities, right? As such, it's the same thing for a transaction when the transaction is flowing through. Yeah.
It's Vipul here. Sorry to interrupt you. So, as you were explaining through the project, the accounting periods for project financial management, right? We don't see the application as a project management.
That's because of the setup. That's the access here in the setup. Once you do that from the rules, once you're given on the application administrator rule, project application administrator and project administrator rules, you'll be able to see those with the data access. You'll be able to see it.